Hi everyone. So in the C5 notes for today, we're going to be going through a practice performance task and answering all 6 parts of the performance task together. As a part of answering each question, we're also going to go over the scoring rubric for that part of the question to talk about what kind of things you want to make sure you would include in your response. A lot of times, students lose points on performance task type questions because they forget to answer all parts of the question. So when you start one of these, try not to be super worried that the math is going to be hard, but instead try to go in really focused on making sure that you read the question well and you always answer all parts of the question. So here's the introduction to this question. Your friend Abby is making a movie. She's filming a fancy dinner scene and she has 2 types of candles on the table. She wants to determine how long the candles will last. She takes a picture, she lights the candles, and she lets them burn for 1 hour. And then she takes a second picture. And then it says here that we should assume that each candle is burning at its own constant rate. And so you're given a picture. In the span of an hour, both candles go down in height as the wax melts. And then underneath the picture, you're given some information about the starting height of the candles and then their height after burning for an hour. So it says for candle A started at 20 centimeters and candle B started at 10 centimeters. And then after burning for 1 hour, candle A is down to 16 centimeters. And then after burning for 1 hour, candle B is down to 9 centimeters. So in the 1 hour that they were burning, candle A went down by 4 centimeters. And in the 1 hour that they were burning, candle B went down by 1 centimeter. It says in the directions to the question that you should assume that each candle burns at its own constant rate. So you would expect that pattern to continue over time. It says you're going to use this information to help Abby think about the candles that she might use for her film. Notice that we haven't actually answered any parts of the question yet. We're now just getting to part 1, but we analyzed the question to make sure we were very clear on what was happening. All right, so part 1 is a short text question. Candles A and B are lit at the same time. What will be the height in centimeters of each candle after 3 hours of burning? On the test, you don't actually have to type any of the work in for this question. They're just looking that you get the correct answer to the question, so you do not need to provide any justification. On the notes for today, we're going to write down a little work. That's just to show you how we get the answer to the question. Candle A starts at 20 centimeters. They want to know what the height would be after 3 hours. So after 1 hour, it goes down by 4. After a second hour, it goes down by another 4. And then after a third hour, it would go down by another 4. And so 20 minus 4 minus 4 minus 4 would be the same thing as 20 minus 12. And so candle A would be 8 centimeters tall after burning for 3 hours. We can do the same thing for candle B next. We just want to make sure that we use its initial height and its burn rate because it's different than candle A. Candle B starts out being 10 centimeters tall. After 1 hour, it goes down 1 centimeter. After a second hour by another, and then after the last hour by another. And so to figure out how tall candle type B is after 3 hours, it would be 10 minus 3. And so candle B would be 7 centimeters tall after the 3 hours of burning. The rubric for this question is a 1-point rubric. And so you get 1 point for having both 8 centimeters for candle A and 7 centimeters for candle B correct. And then any other response that you type in for this question would get you 0 points. So you have to have both of them right to get the 1 point. If you got one of them right and one of them wrong, you would score a 0 on part 1 of this question. On part 2, Abby claims that since candle A is burning more quickly, that it would burn out or have a height of 0 first. So her claim is that candle A would burn out first. Another student, Julie, says that since candle B starts out being shorter than candle A, candle B would burn out first. And so Julie's claim is different than Abby's claim. For the question for part 2, the question you want to answer says which candle will burn out first. Give a mathematical explanation to convince Abby and Julie of your solution. And so we want to make sure that in this question, we not only answer the question of which candle would burn out first, but we also provide an explanation of why it is the case that that one is burning out first. The box that's provided for this question is large, which indicates that it's a short answer type response. So this is where you're going to be able to type numbers on your keyboard. You're not asked to create an equation, but you can still type just regular math numbers out while you're writing your answer. When you're doing the work for this question, you want to make sure that you clearly label the things that you're writing down. So candle A starts at 20 centimeters, and then it goes down by a rate of 4 centimeters per hour. So if you start at 20, so you take away 4 5 times, that would give you 0 centimeters. And so candle A would burn out in 5 hours. Candle B starts off at a height of 10 centimeters, and its burn rate is 1 centimeter per hour. And so after 10 hours, candle B would have a height of 0 centimeters. And so candle B would burn out in 10 hours. So although it starts off taller, candle A will be the first candle to burn out. Candle A will burn out twice as quickly as candle B. The rubric for this question is a 2-point rubric. So in order to get both of the 2 points, you have to determine first that candle A would burn out first, and you have to provide a mathematical explanation that includes the initial height and the burn rates like we did up above. To get 1 point, out of the possible 2 points on this question. If you correctly determine that candle A would burn out first, but if you don't provide an explanation that includes the initial heights and the burn rates, then you would earn only one of the 2 points for this question, and then you would get 0 points for all other responses. One more note for this question. So Abby ends up being correct out of the 2 students that had ideas and claims about this problem, but notice in the directions to the question, it does not specifically state that you have to say which student is correct. If the directions included that part, then you would want to make sure that down here in your answer, you said somewhere here that Abby was correct, but we weren't asked to say that, so we don't need to include it in our answer. All right, so in part 3, it says Abby has 3 hours left to film. She lights a new candle A and a new candle B, and then starts filming her movie. This question wants to know, in the 3 hours she has left, will she capture the moment when the candles are exactly the same height? And we need to explain how you can determine the answer to this question. On this question, you don't have the capability to draw lines to make a table, but I think that making a table would be a nice way to demonstrate the answer to this question, so I'm going to do that by making a list. So at the start, candle A is 20 centimeters and candle B is 10 centimeters. After 1 hour, candle A has gone down to 16 centimeters and candle B has gone down to 9 centimeters. So they're still not equal to each other. Candle A is still taller. After 2 hours, candle A has gone down to 12 centimeters and candle B has gone down to 8 centimeters. So they're still not equal to each other. Candle A is still taller, but they're getting closer. And then after 3 hours, candle A has gone down to 8 centimeters and candle B has gone down to 7 centimeters. So candle A is still taller than candle B, but they're getting much closer, much closer, much closer. If Abby stops filming after 3 hours, she will not yet have captured the moment when they are equal because candle A is still taller than candle B after 3 hours. So in the box, you would need to type an explanation that describes how you know this is true. And so a description like this would help answer that question. No, after filming for 3 hours, Abby will not capture the moment when the 2 candles are equal. The point where the 2 candles are equal would happen a little after 3 hours. At 3 hours, when the filming stops, candle A is still just a little bit taller than candle B. And so the rubric for this question is a 2-point rubric. And so in order to get a 2 on this question, you have to answer the question correctly. So you have to say no, and then you also have to provide a mathematically valid argument for why the answer to the question is no. To get 1 point, you have to say no, but then your argument is not valid. And then you would get a 0 for all other responses. So remember, answering the question correctly gives you part of the points, but you have to make sure that if it asks for a mathematical justification, you provide a mathematical justification. Notice again that in my answer to this question, I didn't set up or solve any equations. That is a completely valid way of doing it. You could also try to arrange your numbers in more of a table format. So there are lots of ways that you can justify your answer to these questions, but unless it tells you specifically that you have to make an equation, just remember you don't have to make an equation. Part 4 on this question, it says you've decided to use functions to help Abby think about the candles, and so we're going to show her how to represent the height of the candle h as a function of time t using the equation h equals k plus nt. So here is where we have to start thinking about this like equations in order to get the points for the question. So in part 4, it wants us to explain to Abby what k and n represent in order to model the different candles. Be specific in your explanation. And so this is a short answer response where there's a box, so you can type numbers and you can type letters like words using just the keyboard on your computer. You don't necessarily have to use full sentences. Your grammar, if it's incorrect, will not take away from your response. If the height of candles is being represented as a function of time, in this question, k represents the initial or starting height of each candle before they are lit. And then n represents the rate at which the candle height decreases over time as the candles burn. Although n is the slope of the line, and although k is the y-intercept of the line, you want to make sure that you explain these values in the context of the problem. And so for this question, the rubric is for 2 points. And so to get 2 points, you have to say that k represents the initial height and n represents the burn rate. You would get 1 point if you were able to identify one of these correctly, but you got the other one wrong, or you forgot to do the second one. And then you would get 0 for all other responses. So in part 5, it says to choose either candle A or candle B, so you don't have to pick both of them. And it wants you to here create an equation. So we're going to create an equation that will tell her the height of the candle at t hours after it is lit. We're going to determine the numerical values for k and n, and then we're going to write an equation. And so there are 2 answers to this question, but you only have to give one of them. You don't have to say which one you're giving when you answer the question. If you were going to answer this question and give an equation that represents the height of candle A, you would type that answer into the box. If you wanted to do candle B instead, you would type that one into the box. You want to make sure you use the correct variables. So if we were going to do candle A, we would say for this one that the height of candle A, h, is equal to So candle A starts off at 20 centimeters tall, and then each hour it goes down by 4. So that's all you would need to type in the box. On your notes today, I want you to add that this would be the equation for candle A. And then again, because today's notes is about getting you ready for the test, I want you to come over here. And so if you wanted to give the equation for candle B, which on the SBAC you would not give if you picked candle A, but the equation for candle B would be H is equal to 10 minus 1T, which would simplify to just 10 minus T, because candle B starts off at 10 centimeters and then it goes down by 1 centimeter per hour. The rubric for this question is a 1-point question. You get 1 point for getting the equation right, and you get 0 points for getting it wrong. The last part of this question, part 6, says, for her next film, Abby wants candles that will burn for exactly 8 hours. You want to give her a choice by designing 2 different candles, so type C and type D. We want to determine 2 different pairs of values for K and N that would meet the requirements for the candle burning down to exactly 0 centimeters in exactly 8 hours. And we're going to complete the table to show 2 possible sets of values for K and N. And so this is a table fill-in question type. This is the kind of question where you're asked to type into the cells of a table to answer the question. And so the fields that you're typing in are these open squares right here. So if the 2 candles want to burn out in exactly 8 hours, they would need to start off at a height so that after 8 hours, they would be completely finished. There's not a rule that says that you have to create the actual equations to solve this. You could just reason the answers by knowing what K and N stand for. Remember, K is your starting height, and then N is your burn rate. And so make a note here that there are lots of possible answers to this question. We'll pick 2 examples on this one that would work out, but just understand that there are lots of possible answers to the question. So let's say that for candle type C, let's say it started out at 16 centimeters. If it started out at 16 centimeters, then your K value would be 16. That's your starting height. And so if you want it to finish burning out in 8 hours, your burn rate N for this one would need to be -2. And be careful, you do need to include the negative on that one when you give the answer to the question. We can do the math underneath to check our answer to the question. So if the candle for type C, if it started out at 16 centimeters, and then if it burned at 2 centimeters per hour for a total of 8 hours, 16 minus 2 times 8 gives me 16, and so that equals 0. So we can check and make sure that it works to answer the question that way. Again, there are lots of possible combinations that you can give as an answer to this question. Let's say that candle D starts out at 24 centimeters, so our K value would be 24. In order for that candle to burn out in 8 hours, it would need to be burning at 3 centimeters per hour, and we can check the math for that down here. So if candle D starts out at 24 centimeters, and then if it burns at a rate of 3 centimeters per hour for 8 hours, 24 minus 3 times 8 is 24, and 24 minus 24 gives me 0. So that one checks out as well. On this one, notice that there are numbers that you could pick as starting numbers that would make the burn rate need to be a fraction or a decimal. There's nothing in this question that says that K and N have to be integers. And so if you picked a number for K that meant that the burn rate had to be a fraction, that's fine. Just make sure that you represent it correctly. The rubric for this question is a 2-point rubric. And so to get both of the points on the question, it says that you need to pick values for K and N that would result in candle type C and candle type D burning out in 8 hours. So you would have to have correct answers to both parts of the question. In order to get 1 point on the rubric, you could have the numbers right for C and wrong for D, or vice versa. So you would have one of them completely right and you would have a mistake on the other one. And then you would get 0 points for all other responses. So if part of each question is wrong, you end up with 0. You have to make sure you have one of them completely correct to get at least one of the points on the rubric. And so this concludes our review for the SBAC test. Good luck on the SBAC test. You're going to do great.